Podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey, everybody. We're back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more lights, more love. We have a returning guest today, the incredible, the generous Tom Bowden. And if you remember, if you look in our history, Tom Bowden was the very first guest on the Midnight on Earth podcast. So he's back all these weeks later. He's the Oregon Director of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And we're going to talk to him in just a second. But first, I need you to do something for me. Go to bluecobracbd.com. That's bluecobracbd.com. And there you will find Blue Cobra CBD oil, the highest quality CBD oil on the market that you can buy. Why is that? It is because the CBD that is in the oil is extracted from the hemp flower using the HIT extraction method. It's a proprietary method, and no other company has this specific technique. It's proprietary. It's a completely natural process. It has no chemicals, no solvents. No gases are used to extract the CBD from the hemp. And we have a Midnight on Earth Blue Cobra CBD discount code. And that code is MIDCBD. MIDCBD. You put that in the box on checkout, the discount code box, and you will receive free shipping on any order in the continental 48 United States. Any order. 1 bottle, 1,000 bottles. Unfortunately, though, this is only for the continental 48 United States. International listeners, other listeners out there in places like Jamaica, the Virgin Islands. I'm sorry, you can't get the free shipping offer. However, you can still get this product, but please check with your laws, the laws of your country, to make sure. And if you have any questions, of course, you can contact Howard directly. And if you have any problems ordering, you can contact Howard directly at bluecobracbd@gmail.com. bluecobracbd@gmail.com. And then you can check with him directly. And, of course, there's a money-back guarantee. If you do not like the product, keep the product. I don't know why you wouldn't like it, but if you do not like it, keep it, give it away. You'll get all your money back. If you had to pay shipping, you'll get your shipping money back. You'll get it all back. Like I said, I don't know why you wouldn't enjoy this product, why you wouldn't experience its benefit, because it is the highest quality product available, and it's 100% organic and 100% Oregon grown. Period. I've been very versed in cannabis products for a very long time, including CBD. I know all about it. It was developed by Howard Hitt, a.k.a. Big H, the HIT extraction method. Howard's oil, I put it in my shake every morning, the Blue Cobra CBD oil. And I notice it. It has the entourage effect. If you happen to smoke cannabis, You can feel it work in synthesis with the THC, and it's amazing. So check this product out, bluecobracbd.com. And Howard has a whole line of pet products coming. We're going to talk all about that at some point soon. So please, people, bluecobracbd.com. Then, when you're done with that, follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. Follow us there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts. Click the button that connects us so then you know what's going on. You know when new episodes drop, whatever's happening in our world, you know about it. And most importantly, tell someone you know. Tell a friend. Tell a person at your work that loves these type of topics, that would love to know about extraterrestrials and the UFO sightings that are going on locally and perhaps in your area too. Tell them about this podcast, midnightonearth.com. Okay, social media shout out of the way. And now we're going to read Tom Bowden's biography. Tom Bowden has over 45 years of UFO research and investigative experience. He became interested in UFOs and parapsychology, especially J.B. Rhine's work, as a youth, and joined the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, a very active UFO investigation group from the 1950s to the 1980s as a young adult after college. The intriguing Travis Walton abduction case of 1975 convinced him he wanted to be an investigator. Tom's early work with APRO led him to investigate some early abduction cases. After concentrating on work and family for a number of years and putting UFO investigation on the back burner, Tom has now renewed his interest and is more active than ever. He joined MUFON in 2001 and became assistant and then state director for Oregon in 2003, and he continues to be that to this day. And MUFON, of course, is the Mutual UFO Network, and Oregon MUFON is the local state chapter of Mutual UFO Network Incorporated. MUFON seeks to investigate the UFO phenomenon in a scientific manner as funds and expertise allow. To this end, MUFON strives to establish a presence in every state of the United States and even in every country of the world, since the UFO phenomenon knows no boundaries and is an equal opportunity phenomenon. Of course, every human being and animals, all the above, plant life probably, I'm sure. Hello, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Jake. How are you doing?
Great. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, you're back.
Yes, I am.
70 weeks later, we have Tom Bowden back on the show. And we talked about your life when you were first on the show. We talked about your history, your lifelong interest in the subject, which then blossomed into your participation in these organizations. And now you are here leading the chapter of Oregon MUFON. How is that going? How are things going in that world?
Well, it's very challenging because one of the goals that I have that I'm having a little trouble with is to build a team of investigators. And it's very challenging because a lot of people think they want to become an investigator, but when they get into it deeper, they find out it's harder than they think. And I think for a lot of people, they realize that it's time consuming and they haven't figured out how to make time in their life for devoting a certain percentage of their time to doing it. And I will say, if someone's very busy with work and family and other things, they probably are going to not really be able to find enough time to do it. So we really try to find people who are so so
Dedicated,
very interested in the subject matter that they're really willing to make the time to do it, because it's very challenging. A lot of times retired people are ideal, especially if they have a good background in some technical area, science and so forth. But if there's anyone out there that is interested in becoming a MUFON investigator, please go to the MUFON site, MUFON.com, and look at the various links there. They have one, I think, that says something about get involved or something, and somewhere you'll find there become a member, and also a link to become an investigator. Of course, to become an investigator, first you have to join MUFON. That's essential.
So it sounds like you've had some people that have been interested and then not realizing it's a little bigger situation than they could commit to. And then also, I bet that there's some people that are expecting to find UFO debris by the third or fourth investigation, or perhaps some, some situation, and maybe they're disappointed in the fact that it's a little more meticulous than they realize. But it takes that meticulousness to really achieve the results, to get the right data.
Yes. Yeah. The chances of us recovering spacecraft debris on an investigation are pretty much low point something 0.0001% and maybe less, because for one thing, if such an event occurs, you can bet that some crack team of the military is going to be there before we are, and even if we get there first, they'll chase us off right away. So we're not going to find that stuff unless we're really, really lucky.
Well, I think people have romantic ideals. They feel like, oh my goodness, they're joining Mulder and Scully from the X-Files, and they're going out into these sites, and maybe it's not that way, though it probably is still amazingly fun and rewarding.
Oh, yeah, because one of the things I try to impress upon people is you get to talk to people who have had their own UFO experiences. And even if you have had your own UFO experiences, which for some people is a motivation for becoming an investigator, it's still interesting to talk to other people who have had their own experiences, either close up and personal experiences or just sightings. In any case, it's interesting. But to be honest, a fairly large percentage of the reports we get end up being something explainable and not really UFOs. Let me just give you a little sample here. Since in the last 2 weeks, since November 21st, we have received 11 reports, one of which was a close encounter report. Basically, these are all uninvestigated. I think maybe a couple of them have been completed, but for the most part, these are uninvestigated reports. But one of the tricky parts is, of those reports, only 4 of them are recent events. The rest of them were reported recently, but occurred some time ago.
Oh, so there's no time for
one of them.
There's no time to get that forensic evidence, the stuff that's happening in the moment.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing I want to point out about the kind of cases we get a lot of cases with video and photography attached. Everybody's got a digital camera on their phone these days, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is the quality of the videos and photos we get is not that great. Very few of them really show anything significant that, anything to get excited about. I mean, if you see a video of a little tiny light moving around in a black sky, you just don't get really any data from that. You don't get a sense of, oh, this is really something, significant. You just are sitting there thinking, what am I looking at?
Right. Could be anything.
Yeah. And so really, for me, the witness account is generally much more significant than the photograph. What the photographs will do is they'll say, yeah, there was something there. and if it can confirm information, if the camera, if the photo includes the metadata, which we use for things like verifying the time and date, verifying that it's an original and modified image, and so on and so forth. And if the person had the geolocation stuff turned on their phone, it's going to give us latitude and longitude. But other than that, a lot of the photos, they don't really tell us that much. We have a few that where the photos were much more exciting, but not very many, to be honest.
It seems like the technology that's in these smartphones and these digital cameras have trouble with low light sources over a dark background, like the night sky. It just looks like one blurry LED light. And I'm sure in a lot of those cases that the light may do some aerodynamic tricks or something interesting in that way. But it could, like you said, it could be anything. It could be a firefly. It could be literally anything. It could be a remote control drone. It could be anything.
Yeah, that's what it ends up being. Now, a few years ago, I had a really fascinating video that showed a really bright light that split into multiple lights that swirled in a downward pattern. But the original video was submitted by someone who's not a witness to the event. That in MUFON terms, we kind of take those reports and we pigeonhole them as information only, which means, this report came in, but we don't have enough information to investigate it, and it's not really a case that we can pursue because we don't have the original testimony.
Right.
Meanwhile, in the same night, another report came in that was closed by a different investigator. Yeah, I did the first case, but a different investigator did the other one. And the other one, he just couldn't get enough information. Once again, he had a photo of distant lights that were unusual, or actually there were about 5 photos in that case. But he closed that case. I think he closed it as information. No, he closed it as insufficient data because there just wasn't enough data. The photos were genuine, but the lights were inconclusive. Then, after a couple of years, I got a report from a gentleman who submitted a video, and lo and behold, it was the same video that the other guy had submitted previously. When I got this third case, this third report, I was able to talk to the guy, and he was the original witness that took the video. And one of the things he mentioned was he was out in Beaverton. He said it was the night of the air show in Hillsboro. Well, we checked it out, and on Friday night of the air show in Hillsboro, there's a parachute team called the Golden Knights, an Army parachute team. Okay. They had done a jump in the evening, Friday night of the air show, where they attached pyrotechnics to their legs and jumped out of this airplane. And so here's these guys on parachutes with pyrotechnics on their legs swirling down. I found a video of the actual event and matched up the date and time and everything. And that's what all 3 of these cases were attributed to, that, because one of them was just a report with the same video, and the other one was a person out west of Hillsboro, Oregon, looking toward the east, and she had taken photos of these lights, and the date and times all matched up, and that's exactly what they were seeing. Was these parachute jumpers with pyrotechnics.
So in that original video, though, the dark video, did it look interesting and strange? Where you? It seemed like it could have been anything, until you saw that.
I always suspected it was something dropping down on parachutes.
Okay,
but I couldn't figure out what on earth it could be. But once you figured out what it was, everything made sense, because here you had a bright light that split into multiple lights that then swirled slowly down in a spiraling pattern. And that was the guys in the parachutes, going down in sort of a spiral pattern over the field where they had the air show.
Well, that's an interesting point.
Anyway,
it shows how people can get confused by things that are very interesting, but then a lot of these cases, a lot of the times, it does turn out to be something natural or at least terrestrial, you could say.
Yeah.
But over the last year, since the last time we talked, have there been any big changes in MUFON or their organizational practices or anything like that?
No, MUFON's pretty stable. I think one of the things that has been going on, and this isn't like a sudden change, this is an evolutionary change in MUFON.
Okay.
They have put a lot of effort into ramping up the work with experiencers. These are people, this is our term for experiencers, also sometimes called abductees or contactees. They're people who have had an up close and personal experience with a UFO or humanoid beings that are assumed to come from UFOs and have had other very strange paranormal experiences that we associate with UFO type activity. And that's called the Experiencer Resource Team. They used to be called the Experiencer Research Team, but they changed the name to Experiencer Resource Team because what they wanted to make sure people understood was not only are they doing research, but they're a resource for the people. Because what happens is people that have had up close and personal experiences, many times they're suffering from what you commonly call PTSD.
Oh, wow.
Because, they're many of them, they're fearful. They have the people that have repeat experiences of this kind, they're ongoing for a good part of their life. And they interfere with their normal life in strange ways. They'll end up not getting enough sleep. It's hard for them to keep regular employment. It can interfere with relationships and interfere with their just overall mental well-being. And so they really need someone to talk to that understands what they're going through. Yeah. A lot of times traditional psychological, counselors aren't ready to deal with this sort of thing.
I bet.
They're dealing with everyone as if, this person has a problem, so maybe they have a disorder of some kind. So should we give them medication, or should we have them, be seen, every week?
Because if they start talking about they start talking about these experiences and in a traditional psychology sense, they would instantly get classified. And then you're saying they would probably get prescribed medication, but MUFON is treating it in a different way.
Right. Well, if someone's a psychiatrist, they can prescribe medication. Psychologists typically cannot, unless they have, an additional degree that allows them to be to subscribe medication. But in any case, they would, be treated as having a disorder of some kind.
Right. Exactly.
Or, if they look it up in the typical guide of psychological work, I forget the name of it, but they have an actual manual that they use. And I have a section on there on people who believe they're contacted by extraterrestrial beings, and they have a classification for that. They're considered to have some sort of disorder there. They consider this some sort of delusional.
Yeah, some version of schizophrenia.
Yeah, right. Wow. But newer people that have studied these things more recently and are professional psychologists, they now recognize that maybe this is really happening to people.
Wow.
And so you will find now that there are a number of people out there that have, a little knowledge, and they're not so likely to jump to that conclusion, which is a good thing. And some of those people work with MUFON either directly as part of the Experiencer Resource Team, or they're just on a list of people we can refer someone to if they need help and they're not getting the right kind of help from a typical psychologist or psychiatrist.
Interesting. So there is now a new understanding that's coming into traditional psychiatry, which is allowing people to embrace this potential reality of these abductions.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're real. We know they're real, right? But it's bleeding into the mainstream consciousness now, which is really interesting. And MUFON has those resources, and they're engaging them fuller now, I would say. So what have they gained from this? Now that that's being incorporated, what are some of the insights they've gained?
I really can't answer that because I'm not familiar with all of the work that they're doing. Basically, each one of those relationships is just like any other client relationship where there's confidentiality involved.
That makes sense.
And the only cases that I would even know anything about are the ones that where I am also assigned as the investigator on the, because each one of these cases, typically they are a combination of a UFO sighting case or a UFO experience case and a contact experience case. And so what happens is we'll get a report from someone who reports that they believe they're being, abducted, or somehow alien beings are in their bedroom, and it comes in as a UFO report that is where they checked off the box for abduction or entity contact. And then it comes to me as an investigator, and then I also make sure that the person has also filled out the experiencer questionnaire, which is on the MUFON main website. And this questionnaire is the entry point for them to contact the experiencer resource team at MUFON. And then we work together and collaboratively. I follow up on the case from my point of view, and then the experiencer resource team member contacts the reporting person as well and has a conversation with them, and goes over the questionnaire that they filled out and asks more questions. And basically we want, the really important thing here is we want to build a relationship of trust with these individuals,
right? So
that they have someone they know they can talk to that's not going to make fun of them, is not going to belittle the nature of the experience, because we know that it's very important to establish that trust. These people have already gone through typically a lot of stress in their life because of what's been happening to them, and we find that people who are experiencing these things, it's not just a one-time thing or recent development. A lot of them have been experiencing these things since maybe early childhood, or maybe far back in their lives. And then we find out that not only do they experience them, but other family members also experience these things. So then we're dealing with someone whose experiences, their lifelong experiences, are out of the norm from the point of view of most people. And so they're already dealing with this feeling of rejection by other people, and enough so that people that have these things, they have certain behavior patterns that are a little strange. Like some of them decide they have to move all the time. They'll live somewhere where they're having these experiences, and then they want to get away. So they decide they're going to buy a motorhome and drive halfway across the country and look for a different place to live or something. I mean, these are from real cases that I've dealt with.
Sure.
And then they'll try living in another place, and the same thing happens. And then they pick up and move again. And then they finally realize it doesn't matter where I go, they're going to find me. So they usually end up coming back home because that's where they have a network of friends or whatever. But it's amazing. You see these patterns of behavior, and you realize that these people have been dealing with some really difficult issues in their life.
So it feels good then to have that, being validated by people
yes.
that are intelligent like yourself and professional, and you get that validation for people that have probably been shunned by other people that they've told the story to. And finally, I guess you could say you're like a support group in a way, right?
Absolutely. that is really what it comes down to. And yeah, and you're right. And they tell you, they expressly say that. They say, "Oh, I'm so glad I have someone to talk to about this that doesn't just think I'm crazy." And, I mean, this is a repeating pattern that we deal with.
Yeah. And I'm sure with all, 45 years later, you've probably seen this pattern hundreds of times in a way.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's hundreds for me, but overall in the literature, yeah, definitely hundreds.
So how is the group looking right now, the Oregon MUFON team? How many people are in it? What are their positions? Are you thin in the ranks? I know you were asking people to sign up earlier, but how are we right now?
My membership is growing, and these are just people who sign up to be MUFON members, and they just want to be part of the group, support MUFON's work, and get the monthly newsletter.
So things are growing.
We have a terrific newsletter. The MUFON Journal is a really interesting and informative journal. It's about a 24-page journal, not a lot of ads, just about all articles, and it's paper printed on paper if you want to get it that way, and if you want a little less expensive option, you can get it just electronically. But electronic journals like this are actually kind of handy because we can have better graphics electronically than we can do in the print version. Because you can't embed a video in a printed magazine, but
right.
you can do it in an electronic magazine, so or supply a link to a YouTube or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
So membership is growing, but what about the actual field researchers?
That's difficult. I struggle to keep people working on it. Right now I have 3 people who are active, but even the active ones, sometimes they have issues in their lives that take over and get in the way, and then for a while I'll have a little trouble keeping them going. And right now I have really only one person besides myself that I can rely on to keep plugging away and working cases. There's another one who's potentially ready to resume. He had a health issue that knocked him out of the picture for about 6 months, and he said he's ready to get back, but he's starting slow because of the heart problem he had. And then I have a third one who's just really kind of struggling and not really on the ball. It's hard. It's hard,
bet. Like you said, it's
really
volunteer
like to
work.
have more people that would really like to jump in there and do this work. But honestly, when I show people and they get trained by MUFON, it's part of the deal. If you sign up to become an investigator, it costs you some money because you got to buy the manual and there's a certain
there's a level of commitment.
It's a financial commitment.
So people put that in,
and it's a volunteer. It's a volunteer job, so you're not going to get that money back. It's just you pay the money and you get the information, but then once if you sign up and you follow through, I train each person. I work with them really closely, and I make sure all their questions are answered as much as possible. I give them resources, online resources to look for to help them do the work. And then I'm right there with them on their first several cases to make sure that they're getting it. And then I turn them loose, but on their own, but I'm still here. I'm still here to support them and make sure that if there's problems they have on a case, that I can help them with it. If they say this case is too much for me, I just can't do it, I can take it back. I can take over and give them something else. And there's just a lot to it. And I mentioned the videos and photos. Well, I would say probably these days, about half of the cases we get come with videos or photos. Well, that just adds another complexity to every case because
Right.
we got to go out and do some verification of that and, look up stuff. And sometimes people send photos that are not originals. Most of them are not trying to pull any stunt or anything.
Sure.
They just think, oh, they're helping us by zooming in and cropping the photo. Well, we don't really want people to do that. We want the original because we can zoom in and crop, but we want to see all the metadata that goes with the original. And so then we have to turn around and ask them, oh, could you try to get the original and not send me the screenshot or the cropped version or whatever you sent. And then, some people are really good at doing that and other people have trouble. They don't understand the technical aspects.
Oh,
So there's a lot of,
it just adds more layers. There's more layers of investigation, and all of those
absolutely.
layers take energy and time and resources.
Yes.
And that is probably why it's hard for some people. They sign up, they're fired up, but then it's just a lot. And this hectic day and age where time's moving so fast, it feels like the weeks go by like days. So I can see, but I would hope, Tom, that some of those donations are going to help you pay for things like cameras or film developing or traveling to these places. I'm hoping that you're able to utilize some of those resources in that way. Are you?
Well, there's two levels of money in the MUFON organization at large. One of them is the national organization, or the international organization, I should say. They get the membership dues and the fees that people pay to become investigators, and any other royalties they get from television show rights, and et cetera, et cetera. That all goes to them. Then the local chapters that are organized by state, we can collect money on our own, either by charging member fees or donations. I do it by free will donations,
Sure.
and people are generous.
Oh yeah.
I try to hold at least one Zoom meeting a month, and used to be in-person meetings, but you know how it's been.
Yeah. Hey, we're on one right now. Yeah.
So Zoom, and we people have been very generous, and so that money is to support our local organization. Now, of course, I pay to have a Zoom account. I pay to have a Meetup account, and then
there are expenses.
Yeah, there's expenses, and then every once in a while there's an expense related to things that are chapter related. Like if we have to go on an investigation and there's maybe travel expenses involved, that money can be used for that.
Oh, good.
And we just keep, we try to keep a certain treasury going, and then I have to pay MUFON, and some people don't understand this, but MUFON had to make sure that the name MUFON was a registered trademark. Otherwise, people could create a MUFON website or a MUFON
just anything.
Group
they
somewhere,
could just use the brand and do anything.
They would be not even related to MUFON. So now it is an official registered trademark with the government. And so I pay a fee to MUFON for the license of using the MUFON name. And it's not a huge fee. It's only $150, I think, or 110. I forget what the exact amount is. But what they do for me in return is they give me, as state director, a free membership for the year. And so that works very well because some of the states are very small. They don't have much treasury. And so what they're asking those state directors to do is pay out of their pocket to use the MUFON name, but then that money turns around and becomes their payment to become state director, to be a MUFON member for the next year as state director.
Right.
So, they're trying to work with everyone to make the whole money situation work. But MUFON is not a well-funded organization. they get all our money from membership fees and stuff like that. They don't get grants from the government or from universities or anything like that.
I bet.
So you take a typical church in say a suburban city. You have these churches. Some of them have fairly large membership. Most of those churches have more money coming in their tithes or donations than the entire International MUFON organization has in their budget. So, people think, well, why can't MUFON do this? And why can't MUFON do that? And I always tell them, okay, you want MUFON to do that? The mutual part of the name, that means we all work together. Okay, so join MUFON and give us some ideas about what you want to do. And then we'll work on it together. But you can't just sit on the outside and say, well, I think MUFON should do this or that. That's not how it works.
Right. Well, perhaps, Tom, you should start a religion. Maybe MUFON should be a religion now. And
no,
no,
we can't do that. I got to tell you, that is one of my big pet peeves.
Let's just make an alien. Let's just make an alien.
The belief system.
I know, of course, but let's just make an alien, the messianic figure, kind of like Dune or something, and then you could make millions, and then all of a sudden you'll have all this money. I'm sure you heard about how they found bags of cash in the wall at a mega church, the Joel Osteen mega church. The plumber found cash in the walls. That was just on the news recently. Unfortunately, MUFON's not that way.
No. Okay. First of all, we're not going to sell our souls and for that,
right,
payoff, because the important thing is MUFON needs to be a credible organization based on rational thinking. If you go, over the top with stuff like that. Now, I have to give you a real case in point. A few years back, one of the international directors agreed to have the MUFON symposium, the annual symposium, which is our convention, be basically taken over by people with these whacked out conspiracy theory type ideas. People claiming to be part of and this was before the official name of Space Force, okay? They said they were part of the military, the secret space
program. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, the secret space program. And they were doing things like they were going through portals and jumping to Mars and all this stuff. This is all stuff they were telling us. And it was a bunch of wacky stuff. And it made some of the MUFON members so mad that they quit. And I'm not just talking about any members. I'm talking about some of our best, most qualified investigative people. They just left MUFON. And some of them started up their own smaller organization that's based in, I think, Alabama.
Wow, it was so frustrating. It was so divisive.
Oh, it was bad. Yeah, it was very bad. Now, they made a lot of money on that symposium because, it was in Las Vegas, which is a easy drive from the Southern California area. And for whatever reason, Southern California is a hotbed of a lot of, conspiracy thinking wackos. And they paid up to come and hear all this stuff. And honestly, it was, and I know about some of those people that spoke, and I knew that the stuff that they were talking about was just, in my opinion,
fiction.
I'm sorry, utter nonsense.
And you think they're making it up for money?
People that eat that stuff up, and they're willing to pay through the nose to come and hear all that stuff.
When I hear it, it doesn't ring true with me. The things you're talking about, I think I know about that symposium. I remember it, I think. But those stories, I mean, those people are out there saying those things. I personally, my own personal opinion, I don't think it's accurate. I think it doesn't ring true with me. And when I see videos of those people talking about that, it doesn't seem like they're telling the truth. intuitively,
Yeah.
and you were there in person with them. You feel like it wasn't that way. But is there any kind of secret space program, do you think, in your opinion, like from the research that you've done?
Well, there are definitely secret projects in our government. I mean, I would be crazy not to recognize that, but that's always been the way it is. I mean, you have not only our military, but our aerospace industry that does the work of developing these projects. The private businesses. So what Eisenhower called it, the help me out here.
Military industrial complex.
The military industrial complex. Because they're working together on these projects, right? Secret projects. Sure, there's stuff going on that we don't know about. But the things that these people were talking about they were pretty much way out there. They were way
it seems like
beyond the pale. I mean,
it seems like things that were in science fiction movies. I mean, you think about the world jumping technology of the movie Stargate in the television series, or in the movie They Live, they had a world jumping portal. It just seems like they're picking elements of science fiction and putting them together in a pastiche way. And then,
well, that is something that I thought about. Yeah, I see. They see these things on science fiction, and they start to imagine that it really could be happening. And then somehow someone comes along that and I'm speaking of the average person. They may think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah.
And then then someone comes along and claims that it's really happening, but it's part of a secret program by our government, and then they eat that up. They start believing that, oh, it's really true. Our government's not telling us that they're doing this. Now, this kind of leads, though, into the questions about the recent developments with the Pentagon.
Yes. Let's talk about that. So let's explain
let's talk about that.
Tom, let's explain to people in a very simplified way, easy to understand, because it can be complex. There was a recent admission from the Pentagon about UFOs and UAPs, which is a recent term, I believe, and they came to a certain conclusion. So please tell us and our audience about that specifically and the conclusion that they came to.
Okay, so first I'm going to sort out the terminology a little.
Okay.
The term UFO originated with the military. It was a term that they coined way back when we had Project Twinkle and Project Rudge and all those predecessors to Project Blue Book. They invented those terms, and then but the problem is nowadays, after people stopped saying flying saucer and started saying UFO, now the term UFO has become in our common parlance, it's become a thing in our pop culture. And so the military doesn't want to talk about UFOs anymore because, well, for one thing, it's less accurate because not all these objects are flying and things like that. So they came up with a different term just basically to get rid of the cultural baggage of UFO and also to more accurately say, yeah, we have a lot of different phenomena that we don't understand. So they call them unidentified or unknown aerial phenomena, UAP. That's actually a very good term. So what happened when back in 2017, when Luis Elizondo, came out with his information and the two major outlets of our media ran with it. The New York Times and the Washington Post both ran these articles revealing the information that he was talking about, which was that, Navy pilots had taken all these cockpit videos. And remember, these are not just plain old videos. These are recordings of the weapon systems on these planes, and they have tons of data. They give the airspeed of the plane, they give the angle, like, when the plane's banking, you
they're
see
highly
this
complex
line across there. Pardon?
It's highly complex.
It's highly complex. It has all kinds of information that's on that video that can be understood and interpreted by a technical person. And so this information came out, and at first you didn't hear anything from the military. They didn't want to talk about it, but within a few months, with all the furor that was going on, the Navy finally admitted that, yeah, those videos are genuine. And we've had people like Commander David Fravor coming out publicly speaking about it and saying, yeah, I was there. I was one of those pilots, and it really happened. And there was so much information coming out, all of a sudden, the Pentagon just couldn't deny it anymore. And so eventually, the combination of congressional pressure and basically public interest got us to the point where we are today. And between what is the name of the guy from Florida? The senator from Florida that sponsored this.
Was it Rubio?
Yeah, Marco Rubio.
Okay, I thought.
And Senator Gillibrand. Now, what we have today is they attached an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act for next year, for 22, saying that they want the Pentagon to establish an official office to monitor all these reported incidents. But what they're saying is they want that information to be made public. And they don't want it to be limited to just the things that happen on the basis of the military. Now, what the Pentagon did in response to this, because that hasn't passed yet, right? It still hasn't gotten the vote and been passed by Congress. So the Pentagon came out with a statement that they're going to create an office, and this office is going to study UFO reports or UAP reports, let us say, but they're only interested in things over what they call special access, special use areas, and what people also think of as restricted airspace. And so special use area is like the airspace over an airport or an Air Force base or a Navy base or anything, any sensitive military area, any sensitive nuclear area. Like you have, all right, let's say around Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, you have a wide area with all these missile silos. So that's actually an Air Force base, but you don't see, again, I'm sure they have a runway with planes, but for the most part, it's all these missile silos spread over, I don't know how many square miles, maybe hundreds of square miles, because they're all spread out. They don't want one strike to be able to take them all out.
Right,
so they put them, in all these different places. And so this whole area would be a special use area. And another, what we think of as restricted airspace would be right over Washington, D.C., the Capitol and the White House and everything else there, FBI headquarters, the Pentagon, everything, those areas are controlled airspace. If you're a private pilot, you shouldn't be flying in there. And if you do, you're going to get called on the radio and say, what the heck are you doing there, buddy? Right. Either, identify yourself and turn and leave the area, or they're going to send, F-16s after you. So that's, so basically what this means is the Pentagon tried to head off the action by the Senate by saying, oh, well, we're going to do it, but they want to do it their way. They want everything to be controlled in their context, whereas the Senate, what the senators are saying is they want a public office that's answerable to the public and that will give data about these incidents to qualified academic people to study.
Do you think it has a chance? Do you think it's going to pass?
I think it will pass. I think there's enough interest in this among the constituents. And here you have to look at, we've got a Republican and a Democratic senator both sponsoring this. And I think it definitely will pass.
But the Pentagon, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
And, you know, if it's got to go to the House too, I think it'll pass there, because what they're trying to do is they want to tack this onto the National Defense Authorization Act. That's basically the next year's funding for the military.
Right.
And so if they get it on that bill, then that bill is going to, I'm sure, pass.
But they did, though, conclude at some point that there were a certain amount of UAPs that were unexplainable. But didn't they say that there was no chance that was extraterrestrial?
No.
Okay, can you clarify that then? Can you tell us what they concluded?
Okay, let's go back to the preliminary report of the UAP task force that was set up earlier this year. And they came out with a report, I think it was around June 25th. The report said that out of 144 reports that they studied, only one was explainable. All the rest were still considered to be unknown. Wow. Now, what their analysis said is that the behavior and capabilities of some of the craft were such that they obviously were technological in some way, but they had a discussion of whether they could be, technology from the Russians or the Chinese, and they pretty much shot that down, saying it's very unlikely that these represent any technology from a foreign power on Earth. And then they said that they didn't have enough evidence to say that these objects were extraterrestrial in origin. So that doesn't mean they say they are not. Right. That just means there's not enough evidence to prove or disprove. And this is something that is a common problem with a lot of people when they start getting into trying to learn about UFOs at a deeper level. And, some people, it's just a very casual thing. And it's all to them. It's all, do you believe in it or not? And but I always say, no, don't start talking about belief, because that's where it's like in a religion where you take something on faith. You say you believe in Jesus, you're taking it on faith that what it says in the Bible is true and all those things happened. And Jesus, died on the cross and was resurrected and all that. You have to take that on faith, because how are you going to prove whether it happened or not? Right. The only thing you have to go on is what it says in the Bible and what other people have said interpreting the Bible. You don't have a way to go and find physical evidence or eyewitness accounts of what happened. It just doesn't exist, right? So when it comes to UFOs, people start to think in terms of belief or disbelief. And I try to tell them, don't talk about belief, talk about evidence.
There you go.
See, what do you have to go on? How can we peel down the layers of this to understand what evidence there is for something, some event? And a lot of it is eyewitness. And then you have to look at the witness. What does this person know? How qualified are they to give us information that we can believe? And their belief comes in the trust that the person is accurate in their observations and that they're qualified to interpret what they're seeing in a sensible way. And a lot of times you have to come to a conclusion where you say, I just don't know. Right. I don't know the answer to this. And that's where you end up with the unknown. Because like in MUFON terms, when we investigate a case, basically what we're trying to do is determine whether there's a plausible explanation for it. Can we find that this is either a man-made physical thing or a natural phenomenon that someone misinterpreted. And I can tell you that I still have people that see Venus and think it's a UFO. I honestly, and a lot of it is because people don't know that much. A lot of people do not know that much about astronomy. And Venus, when it's really bright, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Up here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of cloudy weather. And if someone goes out on a clear night and they haven't really paid that much attention to what's up in the sky, and all of a sudden they see Venus or Jupiter and it's really bright, it's impressive. And they can be very excited about what they see. So you have to take that into consideration.
So Tom, has the Pentagon's conclusion though been a sea change for the disclosure movement? Do you think that we made a leap there and now we're steps closer to disclosure, or is it just another kind of smoke and mirrors type scenario where they give you a little bit to keep you satiated, but then make you wait indefinitely?
Well, I'm not going to give you an either or answer on because you have to realize that, okay, first of all these government agencies, who runs them? They're run by people, right? And people of varying levels of responsibility and authority. And so you have people, and people, of course, have different opinions about things. You know, they might keep their opinions to themselves when they're at work. And unless something really big happens where they can take their opinion and run with it, most of them just keep it to themselves because they don't really want to threaten their job security by coming out with something they're not really authorized to talk about, right? So what you have is a situation where there's certain information that's already out in the public. They can't really deny that stuff. All they can do is say, yeah, it really happened, but, and then they have their excuse for why they maybe don't think it's important. But we know, those of us who've been studying UFOs for years and years, we know what's in the literature from the past, and we know what kind of things happened, and we know what other people did to cover up things. I mean, all you have to do is really study the Roswell case in depth, and you can understand how deep this stuff can go. And so what happens is the information overall that we have about this whole phenomenon, and I'm not just talking about the UFOs that are seen by people in the sky. I'm talking about the whole abduction business and all that. The whole thing is very complex. And so what you have is a situation where the agencies that track this stuff, they're largely intelligence agencies, because you have to remember the number one thing to keep in mind is UFOs are a matter of national security.
Right.
And the Air Force and other agencies have tried to tell us that wasn't true, but we know for sure it's true, and I can prove it.
Yeah.
But before I get into the proof, I'm just going to say that they are a matter of national security. So what that means is then the keepers of the information are the intelligence agencies. Intelligence agencies are organized in two ways. They have two aspects of their organization. There's levels of access, which are security clearance level, and there's compartmentalization. And compartmentalization is a matter of what they call the need to know. In other words, whatever project you're working on, let's say you're an agent in the CIA, you have an assignment. Whatever your assignment is, whether it's researching foreign press reports or whether it's keeping track of satellite surveillance of foreign areas where they might have missiles, they give you the information. The information that comes to your desk is what they think you need to know to do your job. They don't give you information about anything outside of that cubicle, whatever your lane is.
Yeah.
And it's basically stay in your lane, bro. And when you go to lunch and talk to your friend that might work on a different project, you're not supposed to share information across the compartments. You're not. That's expressly forbidden. So, what happens is stuff gets buried in these agencies. And if they don't think that the public needs to know, then they don't want to tell us. And so some people say, well, isn't there someone who's in charge of deciding whether the decisions made about, need to know are valid or not? The answer is no. The person who decides whether you have the need to know is the person who has the information. They decide.
Right.
And you don't know what their personal agenda is. But one thing you can count on is their personal agenda is, as a person, as a feeling, thinking person, is usually largely overridden by their understanding of what their duty is to do their job and to keep in line with what the expectation is of whoever they work for, whoever's the guy above them. And so this hierarchy, which exists even in the corporate world, is controls, causes the information to be controlled pretty tightly. People don't want to suddenly break out and blow the whistle because it's not comfortable. One thing I want to point out now, the term whistleblower, we all know what a whistleblower is.
Right.
I'm going to make a statement that some people will maybe get mad at me about, and that's too bad. Okay?
Go for it, please.
There's no such thing as an anonymous whistleblower.
Exactly.
Right? So when I hear this, I say, I read this stuff on the internet. Oh, an anonymous whistleblower said that such and such happened and blah, blah, blah. I say, I'm sorry, there's no such thing. A whistleblower is a person who puts their reputation and identity on the line and comes forward and says, I think this is not right, and I'm going to tell people about it. And the reason you can believe me is because I work in XYZ department and I have seen these documents and I have seen this and that. That's how I know. If someone's an anonymous whistleblower, there's nothing to back up what they say. Anyone can say that. They just make up stuff and say, oh, I'm an anonymous whistleblower and I know this. It just doesn't wash. I'm sorry.
Right.
You look at the real situation with any major incident that's happened in our politics where someone has come forward and said what they know. You look at, the impeachment actions against President Trump. Those were backed up by people in the know who worked in those departments and knew what happened and knew who said what to whom and heard phone conversations or were involved in meetings, and they knew what happened, and they were talking about that. That's what a whistleblower is. It's not some mysterious person that no one's ever heard of, and they can't even figure out who they really are.
So you're saying a lot of that anonymous whistleblower stuff could be disinformation, is what you're saying?
It could be, or it could just be somebody
Fiction.
that just wants to attract attention on the internet and likes to, create havoc.
Sure.
But honestly, there is a lot of disinformation on the internet, and we know that.
Of course. But, just to close out that discussion that we had about the Pentagon. So in 2022, that's really the evolution of that experience. In 2022, there could be this office that if everything passes, there could be this office that's interfacing with civilians that has this UFO information. But if it doesn't pass, then everything just kind of goes back in the closet, goes back in the shelf and gets put away.
I think so, yeah. But the Pentagon did say they're going to create this new office, and I'm sorry I don't remember the acronym.
That's okay.
It's a little bit of a mouthful. But this is supposed to monitor, various sightings because. Honestly, when you talk to reasonable people in the government and military, they do admit that, it's a problem if we have unknown aircraft intruding onto, the airspace around a commercial airport. that could create an accident. It's a safety issue.
Right.
So they have to admit that stuff. They can't really deny it. And if it's starting to affect the operations of, say, our battle fleet out there, our aircraft carriers and stuff, yeah, it is a problem. I mean, they don't really want to talk about the military stuff.
In Oregon, it's what is it? Today is December 4th, 2021. In Oregon, how many cases or how many reports have been logged for this calendar year so far in Oregon?
Okay. So there's two ways to count them.
Okay.
And one of them is by when the report comes in. By report date, I would say over 100,
wow.
Well over 100, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100, 120. But the other way to count them is by when the incident occurred. I don't have that information. I would have to do a little bit of a search of our database to figure it out. Because what happens is we get some cases that are of events that happened quite a while ago for whatever reason. Right, for example, recently we got a photograph. The guy took a photograph in 2006, and he found what he thought was an unknown object in the photo, but he doesn't remember seeing it. He just found it in the photo. This happens a lot.
Interesting.
Honestly, in that case, we closed that case as insufficient data because you just don't get anything out of that kind of. Personally, I thought it looked like a bird, but it's hard to argue what it is because when I zoomed in on it, the pixel pattern started to emerge before I could see enough detail to identify the shape of the object. So to me, it's kind of sort of probably a bird, but
so that's you
just one. Don't know.
But what are some of the bigger cases, some of the more interesting cases that have happened this year? Can you share some information about that with us?
Yeah. I had a guy who came forward. Now the incident occurred in February, and he said that he found what he thought was an alien handprint on his bedroom wall.
Oh my God.
And I saw it. I went there and I looked, and it's definitely something strange. And the thing is, you'd say, oh, just it's a human handprint. But no, the hand proportions were all wrong. The fingers were too long. The thumb was displaced in terms of where it attached to the palm. It was huge. It was like, the hand of the biggest NBA player you can imagine or something, and maybe then some.
But that syncs up with the traditional gray understanding of the hand size.
Right. Well, there's one thing you have to remember about this. You can't go by any prior assumptions in these cases. Right. You have to just look at what we're dealing with. What is it? Just what are we seeing? Don't worry about whether it matches what we think, because you don't know what to think. Right. There's too much variation in all this stuff. So what I did was I took some samples in an attempt to see if there was any unusual DNA. That didn't work. I sent the samples to a lab. The lab could not find any non-human DNA in the sample. But it's definitely interesting because it depended on the kind of light you used. We tried different things, ultraviolet light and just, low, regular standard light. But the thing that's interesting about the case wasn't so much the handprint as the guy's story. And so here was a guy who said that he started having strange experiences at an early age. And he said that all the way through, middle school and high school, he was having what we call abductions or alien, contact.
Yeah.
Through and on frequently. I mean, like on a almost very regular basis for years and years, and even ended up in the hospital. And I forget what he said was his medical problem. And he said they even came in there in the hospital while he was there.
Oh my God.
And he was just having all these experiences to the point where he got so used to them that he became more accepting of it. You know, I was telling you before about the people who experience like PTSD. Well, this guy got to the point where he no longer really felt that stressed out about it, and he's able to live a fairly normal life on one level, even though he has these frequent experiences. And the guy has a nice administrative job with the state of Oregon, and is able to function and go to work every day, or at least most days, and do his job, even though he's having and is still having these strange experiences. And, you know, he's a good example of someone who, we've run into them, who has gotten to the point where they don't consider the whole thing negative anymore. They've come to terms with it, and they can accept it and they can tolerate it. But he's not a big, you know, person going around trying to proselytize for the aliens are here to save us or anything like that. He's just a regular guy who's just trying to live a normal life in spite of all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes with him. And you find that there are a lot of people like that.
Have you heard, this makes me think about some of the abduction experiences where people talk about a biochemical reaction triggering it. Essentially, in our brains, as you might know, there is the compound DMT, which is released when we're born and when we die, and also in extremely stressful situations. And it's also a very potent psychedelic substance. And it can allow, the substance itself can allow for consciousness to travel into a different dimension, where a lot of people report about interacting with grays and similar alien type organisms. So could this be a situation where this person maybe has, his brain produces more DMT naturally, so he's able to create that interface? Or do you think it's sometimes how these extraterrestrials follow people by genealogy and DNA strands?
Yeah, you bring up some interesting things that I really hadn't pursued. I've heard of DMT as what the so-called spirit molecule, but I haven't studied it in depth. I thought it was just a drug that people took in order to induce
hallucinations.
You know, these experiences that some people say they see alien beings in these experiences. I didn't realize that it was naturally produced in the brain. I didn't know that. So that would be an interesting research project for somebody. You know, like I say, MUFON is a big tent organization. It's a inclusive organization. We like to have people join and say, yeah, I'm going to do research on something, instead of saying, oh, MUFON ought to do this or MUFON ought to do that. No, it doesn't work that way. So that would be an interesting thing for someone to take on.
Well, there is.
I have a resource, a very smart guy that actually maintains the Oregon MUFON website that I might bounce it off of, because he did a little bit of study on DMT at some point. I think he was afraid to actually take it, although he might have taken it.
It's actually not that scary. I've done it probably dozens of times in my life. And to be completely honest, you do interact with some entities in the most highest potency aspects of the experience, though it's an incredible experience. In some cases, you have a simulated near-death experience because, like I said, your brain releases it when you die, so you get that experience.
Yeah.
However, there is a conspiracy theory, of course, that there is a other secret space program, not the one that you're talking about earlier, that we talked about earlier with the portals and the, you know, interdimensional colonies on other galaxies, things like that, where actually the astronauts are taking large amounts of DMT and going into intravenously and going into these dimensions and interacting with these beings, and even in some cases having meetings with these beings. So that's another theory, another secret space program, is that they're actually going into these other dimensions and interacting with these entities using DMT as a catalyst. Pretty wild, huh?
Well, it's wild if true. That's one of those things. When you start talking conspiracy theories, almost anything goes. But the proof resides with the claimant.
Yes. Yeah, I would recommend definitely.
So I would say, what evidence do you have that this is real?
Right. I would recommend doing research into the extraterrestrial DMT phenomena. I forget there's a specific author that wrote a lot about it. But let's talk about Oregon again. What other cases are you going to highlight for us that you feel like are strong that have happened in the last year?
Well, it's hard to say, but yeah. Can I go back a little further?
Sure. Yeah, please.
I got a really good picture.
You can go back as far as you like.
Are you up for me sharing my screen?
Oh, go ahead. Hopefully I'm technologically inclined enough to figure out how to get that to work. But go ahead and try.
Give me permission.
Let's see. Share screen.
I'm going to click on it and see if it lets me do it. Post disabled. Okay, so I have to wait till you let me.
I think there we go. I think I just did.
Okay.
Did it work?
Yeah, it did. And here we go. I got a thing here. I'm going to share this picture.
Okay.
And then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. This is some artwork.
For people that can't see this, that are just listening to the audio, I'd just like to describe it. It's a painting, but it looks like some sort of ship with lights. It's very blurry. It looks like a blurry photo. At first I thought it was that. You see a red light, some white lights on the side, and kind of a center rectangle with some electrical field around it. Now what is this, Tom?
Okay. The two gentlemen were going off on a fishing trip in the wee hours of the morning, about 4:30 in the morning, down in the Klamath Lake area of Oregon. And they were just leaving the town of Fort Klamath on state highway, and they saw this really bright light in a field, like a farmer's field. And I think there were cattle in the field too. But they saw this really bright object, and they both described it as looking like an A-frame. Which we would call a chevron or triangle. And he noted that there was the red light that I think he said was blinking, but it was really bright. And they were both astounded by it because they thought, is that some kind of farm equipment or what is that? And they looked at it as they drove along, and then they got to where they couldn't see it anymore. And they said, you know what, we should go back and take a better look. So they turned around and came back to where they thought they could see it again, and it was gone. They said there was no sound, and I'll forget how far away we decided it probably was, but it wasn't, terribly far away. It was probably maybe a quarter mile at the most from them. But it was just really astounding. Now, this is one of the problems we have, as I mentioned before. We rarely see photographs that are this clear.
Right,
Almost
so they had to paint it.
Yeah, and they weren't prepared to take a photograph anyway, but this guy, worked as a commercial artist. So he was really able to do a really good rendering of what he saw. And I thought this was just a terrific painting. This is from the summer before last.
Wow.
But I was really impressed with this case because the two witnesses were just excellent witnesses. And they were just solid guys, regular. I mean, these were just good old boys, they were like retirement age. One of them had been an auto mechanic. That was the second witness. And the first guy was a commercial artist and also worked as a river guide, taking people on fishing trips and boating trips on the rivers down there. And they were just regular people. I mean, this is an amazing thing. that just blows me away.
Yeah, well, it is.
Many of the witnesses are just regular people. They're
Right.
not, some strange, way out there type of people.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the strange way out there type of people, I did want to ask you about this. Now, I know that how you're going to answer this is not the official viewpoint of MUFON or even Oregon MUFON, but as a person, what do you think about people that claim to channel extraterrestrials like the Pleiadians and things like that? There's so many people, including guests that have been on this show, that claim that they have these experiences where they're able to communicate with extraterrestrials in a psychic or telepathic way. What do you think about that personally?
So let's stop the share and then I'll talk about that. So channeling. The first book I read on channeling was Seth Speaks.
I've heard of that
long time ago.
Right.
Okay. And there have been a lot of people that have been through the years have been channelers and have, given us messages from these beings. And honestly, it all comes down to, do you believe them or not? There's just no way to prove or disprove whether what someone says, if they say they're channeling. And, this is kind of that whole problem of objective knowledge versus personal experience. And if someone is saying in their personal experience, they're getting messages from some beings and they're writing them down, or they're recording them in some other voice or something, you're just trusting that the personal experience being related by that person is valid, or you don't believe. Personally, I try to stay agnostic. I just say, okay, yeah, that channeling is interesting. If you all believe it and you want to listen to them and attach importance to it, that's fine. But leave me out of it. I'm just not interested, because I'm more interested in things that have some kind of objective, rational evidence that I can follow up on.
Right. And that's your job. You're out there doing the hard searching, the real material evidence, the material research, the eyewitness testimony.
Right. I'm sifting through, the piles of reports that come in to MUFON that say, oh, so-and-so saw something strange in the sky, trying to figure out whether that's an explainable thing or not. And it's not easy, but, that's what we try to do. And then we just classify them. We say, okay, this one's identified, and this one, we can't figure it out. There's not enough information, so it's insufficient data. And this one, okay, we have lots of information. We studied it all, and we can't come to the conclusion that it's man-made and it's not natural. So I guess this one's unknown. So that's a UFO. In our terms, we call unknown, either unknown, unknown, unidentified aerial phenomena. I guess we call them UAP or what? No, we use a different term. I can't remember it now. UAP stuck in my head, but we have a term for an unknown that looks like a craft-shaped object.
Okay.
Like that photograph I showed you. This would be one of those. All right. Or an unknown that is just like a light in the sky that moves oddly, or some kind of an orb that floats around and does something unusual. We just call that unknown other. It doesn't look like a flying saucer. It doesn't look like a flying triangle. It's just something weird and unexplainable. Then we call it unknown other. And then, of course, we've got to deal with the hoaxes, occasional hoaxes. No, we don't get a lot of hoaxes. For one thing, MUFON has some people that screen out stuff, and if they just read the reports. And believe me, I've seen some hoax reports.
Oh, I'm sure.
They're usually wild, over the top, goofball stuff with bad language interjected, and it's usually, some like 16, 17-year-old kids goofing around on the internet or something.
Yeah, just having a prank or whatever.
They're easy to identify. And then the other thing we have is, I said, information only. Like, for example, oh, I saw this UFO on a webcam in Antarctica, and you should look at this. And I said, yeah, well, how can I look at it? Because there's no archived recording. It's just the live webcam that you saw. And they show me the screenshot from their TV, or whatever they were looking at, or the computer screen. I said, I can't do anything with that. That's interesting information at best, but it's not a legitimate case I can look into.
Yeah. So as far as channeling, you said the jury's out. You're just going to stay neutral until you have hard evidence. But as a person, as Tom Bowden yourself, extraterrestrials, these crafts, they're real, right? They're real. I believe they're real. What do you believe personally? Aliens? They're real?
Okay. All right.
On every level.
What I think is that we are dealing with something, a real phenomenon that involves something that's hard to pin down. There's definitely a physical manifestation. The craft look like something solid. People have had stories, like even Travis Walton, people have stories about being on board these craft, and they have corridors that you can walk around. They have rooms and doors you can go in and out of, and all that kind of stuff. And so my feeling is, it's on some level, it's a physically real thing. But whether they come from another planet or not, maybe not. It's hard to say. Are they people from our future that have traveled back in time? Okay, now that's another theory. That's another hypothesis that people talk about. Are they beings that actually coexist with us on our planet and have, bases under the ocean or something? That's another competing hypothesis, because we know one thing, and this has come out kind of relatively recently, but I would say at least the last 20 years or more, that people observed how these, flying objects can easily go in and out of the water.
Yes.
With, ordinarily, if you take a, regular airplane, you try to fly it into the water, not a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you have submarines. Well, submarines, they go underwater, but they can't fly.
Right.
And so when you see objects that are moving under the water and then they come to the surface and they fly off in the air, or vice versa, one of the things that happens is, and one of those videos, Tic Tac videos or something that they released from the Navy pilots, they show an object going into the water. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't make a big splash. Ordinarily, you take a big craft like that and you fly it into the water, and even if that craft is capable of surviving the impact, you're going to have a huge splash of water. Well, it didn't make a big splash. It just slipped into the water with barely any sign of an impact. And so the question is, how does that work? And then the next question is, where do they go? Now, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about what's under our oceans.
That's true.
It is true. I mean, people have really looked at it. They realize this. There's a lot of unknown stuff under our oceans, because look, our planet's over 2/3 of the surface of the planet is ocean. And so there's a lot of stuff hidden there that we just really don't know.
And plus the depths of the water too. It's hard for us to reach the bottom of the ocean. So there could be vast situations going on in under ocean cave systems, and all of these places they could have structures. It's mind blowing to think about. But Tom, we've had an incredible interview. We're coming to a close, but I do want to tell people where to find you. The biggest thing is that Tom is looking for field researchers. if you're listening to this, if you're in the Pacific Northwest and you're interested, or you know someone in the Pacific Northwest that's interested, that wants to do this research, contact Tom. Go to OregonMUFON.com. And there you'll find the information, and you can find where to sign up, because he really needs help. Let's get the word out to people that are interested in this. All the listeners out there, let's spread the word. Let's help Tom find more support. But if you just want to give financial support, of course, you can donate there at OregonMUFON.com and help Tom, help our state, Oregon, help our local chapter investigate these situations, investigate these reports. And then if you want to know just more about MUFON in general, of course, you can go to MUFON.com. And Tom, before we go, is there anything you want to leave people with besides the petition to learn more about signing up? Is there any thought you'd like to leave our audience with? 110 countries around the world.
Boy, I would just say that this whole UFO issue, for some people, it's just more or less entertainment. But I can tell you, this is a very significant issue. And people really need to, they owe it to themselves to find a good book on the subject. And on OregonMUFON.com, we have a link down on the left, on the right side of the screen, there's a list of links, and look for the one that says books. You click on that and you go in there and you'll see an incredible annotated bibliography on books to read. I suggest the books because they go into real depth. I can tell you one right off the top of my head that I think would be great for a lot of people to get hold of if they can. Richard Dolan, UFOs and the National Security State. There's two parts of it. Part 1 and Part 2 have been published. He promised Part 3. He's a little bit sidetracked. He's doing a lot of stuff these days. But if you just get either one of those or both of those, UFOs and the National Security State by Richard Dolan.
Okay.
I tell you, because not only is it a good book, but it has an extensive reference to other books in it, the bibliography and footnotes and so forth. As good scholarly books do have, they have reference to the material that the book was taken from. It's a great read.
So you can start there, and then that'll lead you to the other books. So please, people, do that. Do that. Check out the website. Check out these books. And if you're listening in a different state, check out your state's MUFON chapter. Investigate there. If you want to contribute there, talk to those people. Get involved. That's what I'm telling people. Get involved. Tom, please hold on through the outro music. Everyone, we'll see you next week. Midnight.